with Adam Shine on Mad Dog Sports Radio, talking trade deadline, looking back to how that all transpired. Adam had a bunch of questions about that. We'll talk with talk with Bills GM Brandon Beane on Thursday at 8:30, and we'll talk with Bills head coach Joe Brady tomorrow at 8. So big week for us here. Happy to have them on. And we talked to Lindy Ruff an hour ago. And currently we're going to get to Anthony Prohaska of Cover One about Jim Leonhard. The Bills hired their defensive coordinator. Maybe you see Anthony's work on Twitter all over the place at ProAnt on Twitter. Anthony, good morning. Thanks for taking some time today.
Morning, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I saw you doing a breakdown. It's at @pro_Ant. I saw you doing a breakdown on Jim Leonhard and thought, like, all right, I gotta get you on our station to talk about it, just because you've been someone that's been on this idea of Jim Leonhard as the Bills DC for more than just like the last couple weeks. It's been, I don't want to go too far and say it's been a dream of yours, Anthony, but you lay it out for us how much you've wanted this and why you've wanted this.
Yeah, it's funny, when the rumors started circulating, I knew I had been posting about it for a couple of years, and I was like, when did I start doing this? And so it was in 2023 when I started wanting him to be the defensive coordinator for the Bills. That was right at the time where, so he was the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin from 2017 to 2022, and after the 2022 season, it was like, okay, he's going to start to make the jump to the NFL. He was this extremely hot commodity, and then he kind of cooled things on himself, went to Illinois for a year as an analyst before joining the Broncos the past couple of years. But everything for me at that time, in his run at Wisconsin, it was just the type of defense that he played, the simulated pressures and the creeper pressures and the hybrid front structures and the hybrid players that he wielded and weaponized, and how he consistently kept offenses on their back foot and made them reactive by playing on the front foot as a defensive coordinator and play caller, and really taking it to opposing offenses and forcing the issue with them and forcing them to have to adjust. And this was around the time where, it's very pronounced now with how Sean McDermott's tenure ended, but we were starting to see a more reactive play from the Bills defense and more kind of, hey, we're going to come out and be ourselves and see what happens, and we'll adjust from there. And I thought that was costing them in the playoffs, and it continued to cost them in the playoffs. And I wanted more of a switch, and I thought Leonhard was the perfect kind of guy to implement that philosophical and identity switch defensively.
Yeah, like if we look back, I feel like, Anthony, over the years we heard that the McDermott defenses, they had their strengths, but you kind of always knew what they were going to do. They were going to kind of live in the same, would it be right to say live in the same box? Sure, they would disguise sometimes. They would throw you some looks, but you kind of had an idea of what they liked to do. And this is more, wild card, more chaos as an idea?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. You would get, and sometimes on the positive end for Sean McDermott in this Bills defense, but you would get these great second half adjustments in games, really going even back to 2024 when it was very pronounced. But same thing this past year too, when blitz rates are increasing for them and you're seeing more man coverage and certain specific matchup-based pieces they're bringing against offenses. And so the conversation for a lot of fans were like, well, why can't we do this from the beginning? Like, that'd be great if we do it in the second half, but let's do it for the whole game. And yeah, to your point, it was more of, we're going to come out, you know who we are, we know who we are, we're going to see how you want to attack us, and then we'll pivot and adjust from there. Jim Leonhard is, I would say, much more game plan specific to kind of boil it down. One of his quotes, it's tied into one of his core beliefs of flexibility, but he talks about, how they almost start with bare bones and then add to a game plan based on what the issues are that they're going to see and based on how they're going to dictate to an offense. So he never wants to be a counterpuncher. He always wants to have things in their game plan where they can dictate flow to an offense. And you see that in the game plan. Each game plan each week is, okay, what is this team's strength? Okay, this is how they like to punch. Let's tie that arm behind their back, make them go with their weaker arm or their weaker punches, and see how we can go from there. Much more of a front foot approach.
Has that been true really going back to Wisconsin too and Denver?
Yes, 1,000%. You see that type of attack-minded philosophy at Wisconsin. And again, it ties into everything. When I say front foot or, even words like aggressive at times, that doesn't necessarily completely mean like, oh, we're going to get a ton of blitzes. It's not the Brian Flores defense where everybody and their mother is rushing, it feels like, on every single down. But it's more of, attacking an offense's personnel, attacking their formations, attacking how they line up. And it could be, with a 3-man rush, a 4-man rush. It could be a game. It could be a simulated pressure or a creeper. It could be a traditional blitz where you're bringing 5 or more It's all just more of, we've honed in on what you are offensively. We're going to try and attack your protection rules. We're going to try and attack your alignments and your formation, and we're going to make you have to go back to the sideline, grab a tablet or an iPad, and be like, okay, what's going on? How do we adjust for this? How do we course correct?
And player-wise for that, how much do you think the Bills will need to execute a scheme and a defense like that on top of what they already have? And really, do they have a lot already? Do you think they can fit into that?
I don't think the differences, and I know this has been talked about a lot since the hiring, I don't think the differences in his 3-4 defense and what McDermott's was with a 4-3 defense, I don't think it's as drastic as it's getting, made out to be. His base defense, Jim Leonhard's, is a 3-4 tight front defense. For those who don't know what that is, essentially a tight front is, you've got an odd front, so 3 down. Sometimes it's also pronounced as 5 down on the defensive line, but you'll get somebody on the inside shoulder of each tackle, so those alignments are called a 4-eye, and then you'll get a nose tackle, usually head up, right on the center, which is a 0 tech. So you have a 4-eye, a 0, and a 4-eye. That's his base look, and you'll get that 3-4 presentation like he had at Wisconsin, and even like you saw in Denver. If you want to get an idea of that, you look at the Denver Broncos and you look at their defensive line, and it's like, oh, okay, it's Jonathan Cooper to John Franklin Myers to DJ Jones to Zach Allen to Nick Bonito, and there's 5 down. But he also operates in, 4-down nickel defenses as well. So there are some similarities in terms of kind of how he operates and tailoring his scheme to the players that he has. What I do think, to that point, though, is they are going to need some more, I would say, kind of hybridized or dynamic players, specifically at the linebacker position, in order to wield that versatility and that hybrid design and creating unknowns for the offense. It helps to have players where, they can rush effectively, they can drop into coverage effectively. If you're an offense, you don't know who's coming from where, what's happening in front of you, how the pre to post snap picture is going to change. So I do think adding some more hybridized guys, I think they have a fine base, but they do need to add some guys that will kind of fit and allow him to wield this defense a little more appropriately.
Anthony Prohaska of Cover One. Yeah, to that point, Anthony, what's the number one piece that they don't have right now that maybe they don't have because of this style of defense? You know what I mean? Like as these players maybe get slightly different roles or asked to do different things, top of the list of needs this offseason for the defense would be blank.
Oh, man, that's a good one. There's 2, I think, for me that come to top of mind. One is a true nose tackle. I think Deion Walker can play in that role, but they need someone similar to what the conversation was last year, even though it was, talked about as a 1-tech. But, with this defense, it would be nice to have somebody in the rotation up front where, they're just a stone that you can drop in over the center. There's somebody who's not going to get moved. There's somebody that's going to mitigate displacement. And it doesn't have to be like a 350-pound type of dude. It's more just about the skill set and the play style. Someone who I talked about this going back to last year, and this year I'm banging the drum again for him, is Roy Lopez, defensive tackle for the Cardinals.
Yeah.
2 years ago, went to Detroit and worked in their rotation this past year. But just somebody with that skill set and that play style in the interior. And then I think also
real quickly, that's not Walker, right? Walker would be a different spot.
I think Walker can work as a nose, but he is more of, and I don't mean this negatively because I think what I'm about to say gets misconstrued negatively sometimes, but he's more of a finesse player on the interior. So you want someone who's more of a true beat 'em up, play with leverage, not get moved type of guy. Walker, even though he's a mountain of a dude, is still more of a penetrator, even though the physicality and the run defense that he showed as a rookie was honestly, far surpassing the expectations I ever had for him as a player, which was great to see. But I also think if you get that type of nose, you can work in a good rotation between him and Walker at the nose tackle spot. But it also allows you to take Walker and kind of move him around the rest of the front and take advantage of the size and the play style that he has, kind of like what he did at Kentucky, where you would see him, he'd be, at a 5-tech, he'd be at a 3, he'd be at a nose, sometimes he'd be like in a wide 9 type of deal, and they would just let him kind of hunt as this Godzilla-like monster all along the defensive line.
How about one level back? How do you see the perfect type of linebacker for a Jim Leonhard system, and also how you see Terrell Bernard fitting in the future here? I know blitzing for him in college was definitely a trait of his. And we've talked about like Mike Will for him. So like, how do you see him, I guess, fitting into that picture?
I think the blitzing will help him. You know, he was it was honestly probably my favorite trait or skill set piece of his coming out from Baylor was you watch him blitz, and he was like a heat-seeking missile coming forward where he would just detonate, not just on running backs, but on offensive linemen as well. And so I think this type of defense that gets you a little more movement, that is playing a bit more attack-based, allows him to shoot and trigger instead of having to play, more reactive, instead of having to kind of sit at the second level on the balls of his feet and diagnose and give interior offensive linemen the opportunity to come climb to the second level and get hands on. He wins. He's not the biggest guy. We know this. He doesn't have a ton of length or frame. So you don't want him taking on blocks and, having to deconstruct blocks. You want him beating guys to the spot. So rushing him a bit more, playing a bit of, more of an attack-minded style with him, I think helps him. And then to go to your first part of the question of, a type of linebacker that second level would help, I think you're really not to go for the low-hanging fruit, but you're looking at like some of the Wisconsin backers or even some of the Georgia backers or the Denver backers the past couple of years. But I think you look at someone like, like a Leo Chenal or a Zach Vaughn. Leo Chenal is available. He's a UFA. Zach Vaughn is not. He's locked up with Eagles. But you're looking at, that type of guy, somebody who can come forward and bang in the A-gap, someone who can align on the outside and set a hard edge as a run defender, but who can also offer you some pass rush pop a little bit, somebody that's able to wear a multitude of hats at effective levels, not just wearing hats for the sake of wearing hats, but somebody who can wear multiple and do all of them, average to above average from an effectiveness standpoint. So you have that hybridized nature built in.
Anthony Prohaska of Cover One on Twitter @pro_ant. Any thoughts on the offense, Anthony? We got you out to talk about Jim Leonhard. I know you have so much to say about him, but this offseason will be an interesting one. They have some questions to answer on the interior of the line. Of course, the receiver position is going to be something we wonder about them targeting, how aggressively they'll do that. Do you have a thought for the offense and where it should go?
And Jeremy, we've talked about this on Twitter before. I like the run-based nature of the offense. I like condensed formations and getting downhill and mashing defenses and going heavy to legitimately run the ball, but also going heavy to kind of pass from that and try and create explosives within that nature. I just think they swung the pendulum a bit too far with the wide receiver room in that regard. But I'm really looking at kind of, the pieces you just mentioned. It starts up front with me. Is the answer at center and guard in the room? Is it Cedric Van Pran Granger? Is it Alec Anderson? Are you good there? Are you trying to bring back one or both of Edwards and McGovern? Are you looking towards the draft? Are you looking to free agency? The offensive line has been so important to this offense, and you don't have you lost two of your starters, and Aaron Cromer retired. So it starts everything up front for me, and then going to receiver. I just need some speed on this offense, and ideally in the guy who's at the top of the depth chart, not having speed in terms of a pure silo role player who's more like wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, but a guy who's going to be on the field regularly, top of the depth chart type of wide receiver who has that speed built into his game. So it's not just a giveaway every time they come in where, here comes the speed guy. We know what's coming.
I'll give you a name here, like the speed guy, over the top guy. If you could in a lab draw it up, is it rookie Alec Pierce?
Oh, yeah, honestly, that was a name.
Just the style of receiver, because people will give him as a name, as an idea now, but that's like $25 million. I don't know if the Bills are going to want to spend that.
Yeah.
You just want that kind of archetype of receiver on an entry-level deal.
Yeah, somebody who can stretch the field, who has athleticism, who can go up and get the ball for you. It's not a speed guy where it's like, he's 5'9", 185 pounds. Yeah, if you can have that type of size and athleticism and frame profile built in with that speed, absolutely. Or even know what it could be, too. It could be someone who's a quality route runner and can win one-on-one, but who also has some speed to him. It's just got to be some sort of package where it's a top-of-the-depth chart guy who's got speed, who's going to be on the field regularly, where it's not a tell or a giveaway that he's going deep or trying to stretch the field once he's on there, because speed is one of a multitude of, top of the depth chart traits that he brings with him. This
is not a binding question. Do you have a favorite guy in the draft for this right now? Again, it's non-binding. It's February 3rd. We got time.
I have not started on receiver yet for the draft. Ironically, even before the Bills brought in Leonard, I started looking at some nose tackles once the rumors clicked in there. I've started with safety. So I started on the defensive side, safety,
Right.
defensive tackle. I'm going to go to edge, and I'll be making my way to receivers, which obviously is a very hot button topic.
Very good. Anthony, thanks as always. We'll talk again.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
Anthony Prohaska of Cover One on Twitter at @pro_and. And got him on because he's had a lot of good stuff. He and Eric Turner at Cover One both posting a ton of stuff about Jim Leonhard. And as he said, like I know he's been banging the drum for the Jim Leonhard idea, and here it is. It all comes home.